When Christ comes, he always comes in disguises, and usually the most distressed disguises. Today, he comes in the form of a beggar, Lazarus, and the rich man simply doesn't see him. He walks over him. Our holy work is to let him get in our way, maybe even make us uncomfortable, so that we may move to holy action.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to the Pharisees, "There was a rich man who dressed in purple garments and fine linen and dined sumptuously each day. And lying at his door was a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who would gladly have eaten his fill of the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. Dogs even used to come and lick the sores. When the poor man died, he was carried away by angels to the bosom of Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. And from the netherworld, where he was in torment, he raised his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he cried out, 'Father Abraham, have pity on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am suffering torment in these flames.' Abraham replied, 'My child, remember that you received what was good during your lifetime, while Lazarus, likewise, received what was bad. But now he is comforted here, whereas you are tormented. Moreover, between us and you a great chasm is established to prevent anyone from crossing who might wish to go from our side to yours or from your side to ours.' He said, 'Then I beg you, Father, send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they too come to this place of torment.' But Abraham replied, 'They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them.' He said, 'Oh no, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent.' Then Abraham said, 'If they will not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded if someone should rise from the dead.'" The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, he has risen from the dead. The question is, are we persuaded? Do we dare to believe what Luke has been haranguing about literally the last 5 Sundays in a row? And of course, that's the difference between those who are well-heeled and those who are hungry, those who are rich and those who are poor. What do we do with the wealth that God has given to us? Clearly, what Luke is trying to do is to give us God's perspective, and God's perspective is always the same. There is a fundamental option for the poor. The way into the heart of God is not through being powerful or having the answers, but always through vulnerability, poverty, humility. That is such a hard message for those of us who have so much to hear. And the question is, do we still hear it? So he keeps on telling story after story after story. And today we've got the story of Lazarus and the rich man. The only parable, by the way, where he names the protagonist, where he names Lazarus. And of course, this comes from old Jewish folk tales where Abraham had a servant named Eliezer, and Eliezer would from time to time go back into earth disguised as a poor man to see if we really ever got the message of the prophets, of Amos, who today is really railing against we who are sleeping on our beds of ivory and improvising, playing a little jazz on our harps. Do we really get the message? So he's telling the story again. And this time it's the story of a beggar who is poor and is hungry and is starving. And a rich man, he doesn't have a name. It's interesting. They call him Dives, but that simply means rich man in Aramaic. And so the beggar is out there begging, and the rich man walks right by him, doesn't even see him. Doesn't see him. Why? He's not looking down. He's not looking down. Now, what Luke is trying to do in all of these stories are two things. One, he's trying to make us squirm a little bit. And the only way that this man is going to squirm if he sees the fellow below him. Now, the second thing Luke is going to try to do is to make us do something, to move us to action after we've squirmed, after we've been uncomfortable. Mitch Schneider, who was the king of the homeless, once said on 60 Minutes, and I'll never forget it. He said, it's okay whether you give something to the poor or you don't give something to the poor, whether you give something to the beggar or you don't give something to the beggar. But what you need to do is make eye contact. You need to look at them right in the eye. You need to see them. You need to see, because when you are seeing them, what you are seeing is a reflection of yourself, because we are all in the same boat. We are all of the same flesh. We are all of the same humankind. And then you decide, after you've been made uncomfortable, what you are going to do. I take that to heart, and I must confess that I'm kind of embarrassed by this, because every time I go to Chicago, I go with a pocket full of change or a bunch of single-dollar bills. And as soon as I get off the train and I start walking over the bridge, there's always 3 or 4 beggars, and I do my duty. I throw the money at them to try to salve my conscience. To say, okay, now I've done it, now I can go on with my day. I'm not sure if that's the action we are called to, but it is an action that is most important for us. To do something. To do something. Our uncomfortableness, our squirminess is for a reason. The rich man dies, and he is buried. Lazarus dies, and he is taken to the bosom of Abraham. The rich man is in torment. Why is he in torment? Because he's been cut off. He's been cut off from the source of life. He is no longer in the bosom of Abraham. The flames of his isolation and insolation are killing him. He's in hell. You know, many people are in hell but don't know it because we are comfortable. Going first class does 2 things to us. It insulates us and it isolates us. And hell is isolation. Hell is being cut off from what? The source. What's the source? God is the source. God is the creation of all things, and He is the owner of all things. And it's okay to have things as long as we use them for God's purposes. But the moment that we hold on to them and we hoard them and we think that they are ours because we possess them, because we have ownership over them, that we are not called to be stewards of them, we have cut ourselves off and we've stopped the flow. And when you stop the flow, you begin to die. You begin to become in hell. And that's exactly what's going on with the rich man. There is a gulf between him and the flow. What's the flow? It's the Father eternally saying to the Son, I love you, and the Son eternally saying to the Father, I love you, and by that, this whole spirit of love comes down upon them, and it overflows. And where does it overflow? It flows into us. And as it overflows into us, we are called to join in the dance, which means that God has given us so much. Think of what you have, and think of where it came from. There are no self-made men or self-made women. Everything we have is gifts. We did not choose where we were to be born or the parents we are to have or the color of our skin. That's a gift that God has given to each and every one of us. What do we do with it? We take it in. And once you take it in, what are we called to do? Let it out. Let it out. That's the flow of God. That's the flow of the Trinity. That's the holy dance that we are called to enter into. That is the joy of life. But what happens when you take it in and you hold on to it? When you inhale without exhaling, if you inhale the oxygen of life, the stuff of life, and you hold on to it, what happens to it? It becomes poison. And as it becomes poison, it begins to asphyxiate us, and it kills us. And we become the zombies. We are the living dead. We are unconnected from the rest of humanity. We are isolated, we are insulated, we may be very, very comfortable, but we are in hell because we have been cut off. Father Robert Barron once told this story of Cardinal George, who was talking to some very rich people over at Mundelein one day, and he says, you know what? The poor need you. The poor need you to get out of their poverty. And you need the poor to get out of hell. Hell is being utterly cut off from the flow of life. And what is true for individuals, I honestly believe is true for nations. What's true on the microcosmic level, on the individual level, is also true on the cosmic level, on the national level. And there is no Dives, there's no richer nation on earth than we are. And the question is, who is making us uncomfortable? Who's standing at our door right now waiting to get in? But the isolationist and the fear in us says we can't let them in because there may not be enough for me and for thee. And so we build walls and we lock our doors. And you know exactly what I'm referring to. I'm referring to the refugee crisis going on right now because Lazarus is knocking at our door. And Lazarus wants to get in. And we're saying there may not be enough for me and for thee, and so I'm inhaling, holding on to what I have, and it will kill us as a nation. We are in some incredible times right now, and the question is, will we exhale? Will we give as we have received? And no one has received as we have received. Oh, the fear-mongers can make us very, very afraid. But that's not our history. That's not our best angels. You know, my daughter is a Vietnamese refugee. And I don't know if you remember the 1970s, but we resettled hundreds of thousands of refugees. And today they are among the best citizens in our country. They make us who we are. They are our most recent immigrants. They are our most recent Lazarus, who in many ways have turned into the rich man. And so the question for them is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are we going to do? In the 70s, every parish in our diocese was asked to take in one family, and I know St. Michael's took in their family as well. Our Holy Father, Pope Francis, has asked every parish in the world to take in a refugee. I know one little boy who wants to take it, the 6-year-old boy who wrote to the president, who saw the picture of that little Lazarus beaten, alone, afraid. And he says, I'll take him. Obviously, that little boy was made very uncomfortable by what he saw and was moved to action. The question for us is that as Lazarus is at our gate, are we uncomfortable enough as well to move to action?